For today's video, I wanted to cover the recent Vanity Fair article, which was titled Justice League: The Shocking, Exhilarating, and Heartbreaking True Story of the Snyder Cut. And first of all, I would just like to say that give this one a read, because this is a great and encompassing article about not just the journey of the fans, but of how Zack Snyder's Justice League and the Snyder Cut came to be and why that specific thing happened, and what happened back in the original set of Justice League and behind the scenes, and how we got to the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League. And I don't want to give you a full read through of the article. I would just want to highlight a few snippets of information or quotes from the article that I found interesting and that are actually new information and could be interesting points for further conversation as well. And to start things off, one of the first quotes that caught my eye was by Diane Nelson, who was of course the president of DC Entertainment at the time, and she said that Zack is a masterful visual storyteller who goes deep on individual characters, she says. For some people that is amazing, and for other people that becomes the problem, because they have fixed opinions about who these DC characters are and are not. And I feel like that she understood what a lot of executives over at Warner Brothers and still a lot of people don't really understand, is the whole point of Zack Snyder's journey with these characters is to find out why these characters become the characters that we love and adore, like how this broken man who wants to murder an innocent human being becomes the definitive Batman that we all know and love, and how this alien who can't really find his place in the world becomes the Superman that we all know and love at the end. And the next quote goes like that: "Whedon rewrote and reshot about 3/4 of Justice League from what Snyder can gather. When fans ask him about the details of the movie that bears his name, he usually has no idea what they're talking about. Worst of all, for Warner Brothers, Whedon didn't exactly save the movie. When we got to see what Joss actually did, it was stupefying," says a studio executive who requested anonymity. "The rubber on the rooftop, so goofy and awful. The Russian family, so useless and pointless. Everyone knew it. It was so awkward because nobody wanted to admit what a piece of crap it was." And it just goes back to, I think, around May or even February of 2017, when Zack actually screened his assembly cut to the Warner Brothers executives, and it was deemed quote-unquote unwatchable, but they decided to go with this one. And what is really interesting to note here is that we have gotten a lot of these hit pieces regarding the Snyder Cut from these unnamed studio executives or sources that it's not coming, it's not going here, but here that kind of sources put it on its head, because in this case, I can clearly see that this was a studio executive who just didn't want his or her name on this piece, but actually had to acknowledge that, yeah, this was a terrible mistake, and it kind of puts a lot of pressure on Toby Emmerich and the other guys over at Warner Brothers to just say that, yes, we were wrong, but because this executive actually acknowledged that everybody knew that it was a huge mistake to let Zack go and to hire Joss Whedon in his place. And maybe the more interesting part of this article for me were the quotes regarding the toxic fan bases. Unfortunately, I think a lot of online fandom and fandom culture is headed into this very toxic direction, says Kaylee Donaldson, who writes for Pajiba.com. It is especially strong from Snyder Cut acolytes, she adds, perhaps because they respond misguidedly to the director's tales of loner heroes in a hostile world. I don't get this from the Birds of Prey fans or the Shazam fans, says Donaldson. I got a little bit from Joker fans, but nowhere near the same level. Nonetheless, she's looking forward to Snyder's movie. I would rather watch one person's chaos than a committee's snooze fest. Okay, I don't know this person, but I feel like that the reason why you don't necessarily get a lot of this passion coming from, especially the Birds of Prey or the Shazam fans, is because those movies were nowhere near or not near as controversial. I mean, I haven't seen Birds of Prey, but I can talk about Shazam, and Shazam is a very straightforward and simple movie. It's not offensive, it doesn't make you think in any meaningful way, it just gives you this plain kind of story about family. It's an enjoyable movie, but it's nowhere near the level of something like Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, or even Watchmen in that regard. But the next quote is probably the more interesting one. G.L. Letamendi, a clinical psychologist who explores superhero archetypes on the Arkham Sessions podcast, notes that fans get especially aggressive on social media when they feel they have been denied something. What I have observed is an enduring false sense of ownership, which can manifest as abuse, threats, and strong, intense reactions when a story doesn't go their way, she says. Fighting for the unseen cut of the film became a cause. In some quarters, the worst behavior metastasized. They are shouting and people are listening to them. Even if it's negative comments, they are getting positive reinforcement to continue down that path. Now, when it comes to the first part of this quote, when a story doesn't go their way, I feel like that this just highlights the most terrible and toxic behavior of the fan base and not of the entirety of the fan base and how people behave. What is important to note here is that people really care about these things, maybe way more than we should. I know I was in that bracket as well, who cared probably a lot more about these entertainment franchises that I should, and not treat it as entertainment but as a part of my life. But it doesn't negate the fact that these stories, and especially in the case of Zack Snyder's movies, the story of that was really important to us, and it was promised back in 2017 that this movie that we are going to get was still Zack Snyder's vision, and guess what? It wasn't. And when it comes to the toxicity, it doesn't really help that even within the DC fandom, back around the time of Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad, you couldn't really talk to people about this. And of course, what happens when you can't really talk about certain things, like why do you think that Batman was killing people, even though he kills in every interpretation? Unless the artists don't want to show that because they don't want to deal with the consequences of those actions. Or that why do you think that this movie did something well where the other movies don't really did that so well? You couldn't really have a conversation about films because back around that time, and even after like Justice League release, it was always Marvel is good and DC is terrible. And you couldn't really get a conversation, and this turned people to become angry all the time. And of course, Bruce Wayne became angry at being powerless of not having listened to him, because it makes people go crazy if they are not being listened to. And it was always a one-way conversation with that. It still is a one-way conversation when it comes to the interpretation of these characters. And what a lot of people don't understand is that if they think there is a certain interpretation of the character, this is why they are the audience, not the artist, because of the artist's job is to give you something that you don't think you need until they give it to you. But yet, as I've always said when it comes to the second part of the quote, we shouldn't encourage people who promote bad behavior. We should not engage with them. You know, how do you deal with the trolls? You let the trolls starve. They live off of attention. You don't give them attention, and maybe they will look in the mirror and realize that, wow, this might not be a good thing to do for me because people don't really respond to me. This is what a lot of YouTubers and just Twitter personalities do in general, and this is why I don't really engage with them. Just try to be as positive and helpful as possible because these people are hurt inside, and this is how they manifest that feeling of being hurt, is they try to bring other people down, and this is not the way forward. And what is interesting to note here is that when Snyder left Warner Brothers, he took his laptop, which was emblazoned with Justice League sticker on it. On the hard drive was his original nearly 4-hour version. Now, we actually saw that laptop because Zack posted a picture of that very laptop. Of course, now we know that he had the Snyder Cut available on that very laptop. Of course, the article talks a bit about the feats of the Snyder Cut movement, and what is interesting to note here is that initially, says Snyder, Warner Brothers just wanted to release the raw footage on his laptop. I was like, that's a hard no. And of course, Toby Emmerich and Warner Brothers were pushing to get the rough cut out. And I think Zack Snyder is talking from the perspective of the fans, and I absolutely love that part from him. Here's why. 3 reasons. Once you get the internet off your back, which is probably your main reason for wanting to do this, for wanting to release the assembly cut. And then 3, you get a crappy version of the movie that you can point at and go, see? It's not that good anyway. So maybe I was right, referring to Warner Brothers as well. And this is an artist at work. He doesn't take compromises. There are no compromises, not even in the face of Armageddon. But this was all I had for today. Thank you for watching this video. If you have enjoyed the video, please leave a like and let me know all of your thoughts regarding the article and the new information that we have gotten in the comments down below. I would love to hear all of your thoughts, and subscribe for more content like this one, and I will see you in the next one. And until then, Remember to keep it insightful.